Hey, how you doing? This is Blake Yarber. I'm here today to talk to you about I'm here today to do the last discussion board post in Module 7. Just want to say this before I get started. According to course guidelines, historians must be objective and honest in their investigations. The main vocal point this week is going to be on the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Essentially, these Bill of Rights was supposed to spell out America's rights in relation to their government. It's going to have different guarantees of civil rights and liberties to an individual, such as freedom of speech, press, and religion. And it also sets up rules for a due process of law and reserves all powers not delegated to the federal government, to the people, or to the states. It's also going to specify the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be constructed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. The main amendment that I'm going to focus on for my discussion is going to be the Second Amendment, which states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The reason for this amendment is many of the founding fathers, the founding generation, believed that governments are prone to use soldiers to oppress the people. It even says that in English history, is also going to suggest that this risk could be controlled by permitting the government to raise armies only when needed to fight foreign adversaries. So again, whenever those foreign adversaries come in and to attack different regions. For other purposes, such as responding to southern invasions or other emergencies, the government could rely on a militia that consisted of ordinary civilians who are basically armed with their own weapons and receive some part-time pay. All right, and typically go to different types of unpaid military training. The onset of war does not always allow time to raise and train an army, just like the Revolutionary War showed, and that militia forces could be relied on for national defense. The Constitutional Convention, therefore, is going to decide that the federal government should have almost unfettered authority to establish peacetime standing armies and to regulate a regular militia. The massive shift of power from the states to the federal government is going to generate one of the chief objections to propose this Constitution. Basically, the anti-federalists are going to argue that the proposed Constitution would take from the states their principal means of defense against federal uprisings. The Federalists are going to respond that the fears of federal oppression were overblown, and in time or in part because the American people were armed and would almost impossible to subdue through military force. All right, and put it to this debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists were the two shared same assumptions. The first is going to propose that new Constitution is going to give the federal government almost total legal authority over the army and militia. And secondly, that the federal government should not have any authority at all to disarm the citizens. They're going to disagree only about whether an armed population could adequately deter federal oppression. Essentially, the Second Amendment is going to concede nothing to the anti-federalist desire to sharply curtail the military power of the federal government, which would have required very substantial changes to the Constitution. All right, the amendment was going to be easily accepted because of its widespread agreement that the federal government should have the power to infringe the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And essentially, this is going to change with a bridge of freedom of speech or prohibit the free excess of religion. This law has also changed. While states in the founding era are going to regulate guns, some areas, especially early on, Native Americans are actually not going to be allowed. They're actually going to be prohibited from possessing firearms and militia weapons, which are frequently registered on government rolls. These gun laws today are more extensive and controversial. There are a couple of different key Supreme Court cases that goes along with this, especially after the foundation of the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court case is going to reject the interception in the United States versus Cruikshank in 1876. Also, until recently, the judiciary treated the Second Amendment almost as a deed letter which means in the District of Columbia versus Heller in 2008, the Supreme Court is going to invalidate a federal law that forbade nearly all civilized civilians from possessing handguns in the nation's capital. This is going to end with a 5-4 majority ruled that the language and history of the Second Amendment showed that it protects a private right of individuals to have arms for their defense, and not a right of the states to maintain an organized militia. So with this in mind, the Constitutional Convention added this amendment essentially to protect the rights of its citizens, all right, and also to appease different individuals that were speaking out against that ordeal. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed my post, and I hope you finish the semester strong.